Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. My name is Hamza Hashmi. I am Chief Executive of TerraBiz and also a co-founder of SIMFOTIX Professional Development UAE. On behalf of both these companies, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to all the early risers in Dubai and also in Pakistan. We have a distinguished speaker here with us, uh, Mr. Sajjad Parmar, who heads the reward function of eBay in the entire Asia Pacific region. So, Sajjad, you can wave your hand so that people can recognize you. Thank you. Um, this is going to be our third or fourth such seminar with the learned speaker, Sajjad, but is the first webinar that we are doing with him. But at the outset, I would like to acknowledge our partners for the event. The knowledge partners, you can see their logo on the screens. IOBM, it's a very prominent business school in Pakistan, um, probably 20 or 25 years old. We have KSPL, Karachi School of Business and Leadership, as our academic partner. We're thankful to them also. NIC Karachi is our supporting partners, and CFA Society. I would like to profusely thank them as well for being a part with us. And they generally have been very supportive. Um, S- Sales Professional Forum. It's a very eminent and strong body of sales professionals and those people who intensely believe in the function of the importance of HR and people, because all sales is about human relationship. We have Pakistan Consumer Bureau. Our digital partner, as always, is Symmetry Group, and our enduring partners from the media, the Business Recorder, the widely circulated daily newspaper on business and economics, and business magazine Profit. So, folks, the topic today, as you can all see, is future of work. What does it mean for HR? Quite a number of webinars have been conducted on this subject. But the true part is, in a very short while, our acclaimed speaker will be taking you along a 50-minute presentation, and he will show you, what development in the last 1.5 year have taken place in the pandemic world, and also what's the road ahead for the post-pandemic world. So the disruption had been there, but the pandemic had caused a great upheaval, I would say, and even the late learners have also realized the importance. And I think Pakistan and UAE are companies have adopted and have adapted brilliantly to them. But we'll have to. But Sajjad is one speaker, one thinker who keeps thinking and writing and speaking about the topic. So he's experimenting with few things also, and we'll be very delighted and to have an insightful talk from him. Uh, Good thing is that in advance, at the time of registration, many of you have sent us questions, and they have been shared with him. So he might take them into consideration while delivering his talk. There, you can still ask questions. If you scroll down the screen, you will find a small form where you can send your questions, and they will be taken up by the moderator. Our moderator is from Symfotix. My colleague Hassam Siddiqui will be talking to Sajjad in the last 10-15 minutes. And here, I would also like to, thank and mention my partner from Symfotix UAE, Kazi Vakas, who had been, now associated with me for the last 10, maybe 15 years now. So he's a very passionate, dynamic, and individual, professional. He is heading SIMFOTIX in Dubai for the last since its inception. He is my co-founder there and CEO. But here, I would like to thank the HR fraternity and the business managers who have registered in large numbers, which shows their interest in the topic and the speaker. You can see the names of the companies on the screen, and so last time I counted, we had about 500 people registered from I would say close to about 100 companies, and equal representation from Pakistan and from UAE and other Gulf countries. We have a few participants from other places as well. Um, so once again, without taking further ado, I just would read a couple of lines about our eminent speaker, Mr. Sajjad Parmar. So Sajjad is the head of reward for Asia Pacific region at eBay. He's based in Singapore. He started his career with Unilever in Pakistan, and he moved to Singapore in 2008. From Unilever, he moved to GSK, the pharmaceutical giant, and there he was the regional reward lead for Asia. And he was also doing stints at the region's transformation lead and was head of HR for Malaysia before taking on his current role with eBay. Sajjad has extensive uh, experience in talent management and talent acquisition, HR transformation, performance management, and HR analytics. In fact, he has conducted a few of his talks and full day workshops with us in Pakistan, and we have received tremendous feedback from participants, and many of them are joining Sajjad today as well. So, with this, I take a bow and would invite Mr. Sajjad to begin his talk and presentation. Thank you, Sajjad. I hope that all the participants with the talent that we have today, and we will be posting that video later also. We still have good questions from you, and this will be a learning and enriching experience for all of us, including our learner speaker as well. And we will keep doing such programs in future as well. So thank you. And over to Sajjad Palmer.
Thank you, sir. Assalamu alaikum. Very good morning, good afternoon, good evening, everyone. I hope everybody's doing well and in the best of health. Thank you, Hamza Saab. Sincerely thanks to TerraBiz and SIMFOTIX, all our friends and partners working towards supporting this webinar today on the topic of future of work. What does it mean for HR? I hope you can hear me and see me okay. I am going to share my screen. I hope everybody can see. If not, please let me know. I want to start by highlighting two things about the topic today and the next 40 to 45 minutes that we're here. I appreciate all of you taking out your time. This topic has been talked about quite a bit, but so let me start with two thoughts first. The first one is, the topic says future of work. What does it mean for HR? The best that I can do right now is I'm hoping to share some insights with you, some themes with you, in terms of what's really happening at the corporate level globally. What are some of the discussions HR leaders and businesses are having around the future of work, the world of work? What are the key themes, broad themes that are coming up? Right? There are no guarantees in the future, as you know. We are living in a very complex, volatile, uncertain world. We don't have any confirmation even for next week. So at the best, these are some themes, these are some learnings, some research that is happening, that has happened, and I'm hoping to share some of these snippets from them. The second one is that there is absolutely no way I can do justice to the topics that I want to share with you. Many of these topics that I will share, I've been part of discussions over the last few weeks and months, and I know for a fact that many big companies are actually taking their time in discussing each of these themes and each of these topics, um, and making sure that they understand the implications of what this means for the future, right? And I hope that some of these topics and themes you are discussing in your companies as well. I think all of them are very, very relevant for us in HR, and especially the way we're going to conduct our business in the future as well. And I also want to say that in case you find any of these themes, any of these topics useful, you want to learn more, you want to be part of a, let's say, more deeper dive, then I've told, TerraBiz, my friends Hassam and Hamza Saab, I'll be very happy to conduct, maybe small mini workshops on some of these topics. I think there's a lot of value in understanding what does these topics mean, especially when we think about the future of work and the implications for us in HR and how we drive some of these topics. And again, this is not from a theoretical perspective. Those who have attended my talks before, I like to take a very practical approach in things. There's no point of talking theory if you're not going to practice it. The whole point of this session today as well is to give you ideas and themes and insights, so you can take this back to your organizations and start having these conversations in case you're not having them. Before I begin, I also want to qualify, why are we doing this? Why are you and I here to talk about these discussions? As an HR leader, for me, what's important is that we stop, and we think about, why are we doing something? In HR, generally, most of our roles are very reactive. We are firefighters, right? We're always solving problems. What we need to do is to be the change. We need to lead the change. We need to be thought leaders. All the ideas that I want to share with you today are essentially to supplement that fact. We don't want business and leaders telling us what to do. Yes, business strategy is important. Yes, functional strategy is important. But there is enough out there for you to understand, identify gaps, and create new things, create value for yourself, for the function, and for the business. So lead the change, figure out what needs to be done, be part of the discussion, and take it back to your companies. In HR, we always talk about engagement, we talk about productivity, we talk about well-being of our employees. All the key themes we will discuss are going to supplement these topics. And ultimately, as we know, when we improve engagement, when we improve productivity and well-being of our employees, the business is going to be sustainable and it is going to grow. The other key point I want to highlight is that we want to drive fairness, consistency, transparency, and doing the right thing. I cannot tell you over my 20 years how many of my friends who are all not in HR have always taunted me about that HR is never consistent, HR is never fair. And in my experience as well, unfortunately, I've come across in my companies practices that haven't been really great. And so my whole notion around some of these ideas and theme is that it should apply to everybody. It should bring fairness, and we should be very, very transparent about it. And it links to my next point, which is about balancing between the company and employee needs. In my role in Reward, every decision I make has a dollar value impact on it, right? If I'm too convenient and if I'm too lenient towards employee, that has a bearing on a company. And if I'm too lenient towards the company, that has a bearing on an employee. So from an HR perspective, I'm always trying to balance between what's best for the company and what's best for the employee. And I hope that in all the things that I will share with you today, you will keep these broad principles in mind. As Hamza Saab said, that the world has changed drastically over the past 12 to 15 months, right? We cannot talk about the future of work till we talk about the impact the pandemic has had and has permanently changed the way the world of work has worked, and what's going to happen in the future. If I take a step back and if I really think about dividing the change the pandemic has driven, I would say that there are a couple of areas where we have seen a fundamental shift, and there are a few areas where the change that we were seeing in HR has accelerated. And hopefully, all these four items should not be a surprise to you all. I would say there are probably other themes as well, but if I really think about and if I summarize all the various discussions, all the forums I've been part of, the work that I've personally done, I can probably summarize them into these four areas. If I start with the fundamental shift, and if I first start with hybrid working, or what we're calling remote working, it should hopefully not be a surprise to any of you. We have all been forced to work out of our homes for months at a time. There are markets where employees have not stepped inside the office for over a year. And so the first fundamental shift which we have been forced into and it's still ongoing, and I don't think it's going to change anytime soon, is this whole concept of hybrid working. And I would say that the hybrid working is not just about can I go back to the office or do I work from home? There are two aspects to this. The first one is the concept of performance management, and I'm going to talk about that a little bit. And the second one is in the future, let's say in 12 to 18 months' time, hopefully, when the world is back to the way it was pre-COVID, it is fundamentally changed the way we look at our work model. Whether we're going to have on-site or off-site, that's fundamentally shifted. And I'm going to talk about that a little bit. The second one, which is I would say actually that hits us more in terms of the way we work in HR, is this whole concept of holistic wellness. And I'm gonna save my comments because I want to share a little bit more, especially in terms of the concept of emotional wellness and financial wellness, and how has this focus of holistic wellness come into play ever since the pandemic has started. And when we think about accelerated change, the term I'd like to use is that we've seen change on steroids, especially when we think about the adaptation to technology, when we think about investment in analytics and AI, we think about all the tools that are available, business process reengineering, automation of processes, and we've seen a lot of acceleration in these two areas. There was already work happening. I mean, pre-COVID as well, there are so many startups in HR, new technology that was coming in. Companies were investing already in analytics and AI technology. But I would say that particularly in these two areas, we've seen this massive acceleration in terms of adoption. Obviously, we just can't walk over to our colleagues anymore. We can't share a laptop. We can't share a printout. We have to work virtually. And what does that mean in terms of technology, tools, productivity? When you think about from a macro perspective, what are some of the things that HR leaders are thinking about, right? This is a survey done by Gartner early in the year, and I want to focus on three items and between May to 2020 and 2021. The first one is growing the business. As an HR leader, you ask any HR leader, one of the key things that they're always concerned about is growing the business. They are business partners. Growing the business is important for them. You can think about the fact that in May 2020, when the pandemic had just started and people didn't know and businesses didn't know how to operate, obviously the focus from HR leaders went down from growing the business because it was more about sustainability. It was more about trying to understand how do we operate in a pandemic world, right? And thankfully, after 8, 9, 10 months, while we have become a bit mature in terms of understanding the pandemic and living in the world that we're living in, the focus is back on growth. So the focus on growing the business from an HR leadership perspective went down last year, and now it's back. Optimizing cost went up. So you can see, and again, from an HR perspective, cost has always been important. But given the fact that for many businesses, the revenue was not being generated, the focus for HR leaders immediately went, how do we optimize cost? Because cost is about sustainability, right? And you would know that employment cost is either the number one or the number two cost to any business. So in the middle of pandemic where we don't know where we're going to grow and businesses are struggling to survive, it was really about optimizing cost. And you can see that that level has come down a little bit, but the focus is still very much there in terms of what HR leaders need to drive. And then the last one I want to talk about is managing risk and regulatory demands. And technically, HR leaders don't get into that, but you can see it went up last year to almost 30% of leaders getting into managing risks because we were in a space which we've never been before, right? Countries got locked down, governments had new regulations, countries that went into lockdown. So all of a sudden, there were many, many more risks and regulatory and governance requirements went up. So the focus for HR leaders went up. And now that we have understood a little bit more, we've got more structure in place, we've got more governance in place, that thing has come down. So from a macro perspective, again, we need to keep in mind from a leadership perspective, what are HR leaders thinking about? I really like this chart because, when we think about the key themes in terms of the future, in terms of work, clearly there is a business focus and there is an HR focus, right? As HR function, our focus fundamentally has to be driving business growth, business transformation, and productivity. And then very strongly supplement that with how are we elevating our HR capabilities, right? I've highlighted the areas which I think are very, very pertinent and which actually have had an impact because of the pandemic, but are going to have an even more impact as we think about the future. The first one is redesigning jobs, right? There was already a lot of discussion happening around the fact that there are so many jobs that are becoming obsolete. There are jobs that are coming up new because of the advent and because of the speed of technology and automation, right? But what the pandemic has done is that as we think about the future, as we think about, okay, so I'm not going to be in the office 50% of the time, and I actually might start working from a completely different location. What does it mean in terms of redesigning jobs? Companies are actually right now focusing on figuring out that if they're going to allow permanent remote working, what does it mean in terms of skill set, right? So you add in the technology factor, you add in the automation factor, you add in the remote working factor. What does it mean in terms of redesigning jobs, right? So that's one major area that we need to think about. Second one is deliver learning through technology-enabled platforms. In an ideal world, I wish I was in Karachi delivering this face-to-face. I cannot, so we're doing this virtually. We cannot have conferences anymore. We cannot have face-to-face trainings anymore. Our learning agenda has to be delivered through virtual platforms, technology-enabled platforms, through apps, and companies generally spend a lot of money on training interventions. So how are we going to manage interventions in learning if we're not if we're not sitting face to face, right? So all these learning interventions have to be delivered through technology-enabled platforms. And skill development, especially for the future, is very much on top of the agenda for businesses and HR leaders. So in an environment where we can't do face to face, we need to focus on platforms and interventions that will deliver the same learning experience that we would have had 18 months back. And so what are we doing in terms of our rollouts and our learning agenda as far as the future is concerned? And how are we going to deliver that? And ultimately, if you think about HR capability and elevating our function, absolutely digitalization of HR in both in terms of the services that we're delivering and also in terms of technology. If you think about the entire value chain in HR, how are we incorporating technology into each of these sub-functions? And how are we incorporating and improving our HR service delivery model? I can definitely talk about many of the high-tech companies where the focus right now is, and they've always been, I think, ahead in terms of, I would say, the digitalization, but how can we improve more on providing better service delivery model through employee self-service and manager self-service? So there's a lot of things that we need to think about. We cannot expect manager employees to come to HR operations and keep asking the same request. We need to automate this process. We need to add value through other means and not just be a messenger and a post box for employees. And my favorite, absolutely focus on analytics. We've always had data, but for a long time, we did not know how to interpret the data and drive insights. We now have the technology, we now have the means, we now have the skill set. We should be making insightful decision making based on data. And the whole concept of analytics supports that. With the notion of these sort of macro themes, I want to deep dive a little bit into three particular topics. The first one is hybrid and remote working. This is an example of just the high-tech industry as an example. What is going to happen, based on at least the discussions I've been part of, that we're going to end up with three models. There are going to be a group of companies who are going to be like, oh, we want to go back to where pre-COVID was, which is basically most of the time in the office. We're going to have a group of companies and who have actually already said that they love the remote model work and they don't care where the employees work from. They can work from anywhere. We don't want employees to come back, and they're fine with that. And then the truly hybrid model where many companies are saying, or most companies actually will end up with saying that, okay, we would like our employees to spend at least 40 to 50% of time in the office. What we will probably see is that the hybrid model, which is sometime in the office and sometime outside of the office, becomes the norm. But there are a couple of implications that I want to talk about. For companies who think remote working completely is outstanding, because when we think about employee mobility, right, there are issues around taxation, there are issues around immigration, there are issues around governance. And many of the companies who have said, oh, we love remote working and we will keep it like that, in my view, at least, they might be making that decision a little bit haphazardly. I think there are a lot of implications around just saying, oh, I can go and work from wherever I want. There were many leaders who, in the middle of the pandemic, said, oh, we love remote working, but actually they've backtracked and now they're saying, hey, actually, we would like our employees back, right? The latest research is showing us that there are employees who are suffering burnout, working from home months at a time. There is value of employees to come back to the office at least sometime. So there's collaboration, there is more innovation, there is more engagement. We are social animals ultimately at the end of the day, and we would like to see people come back into the office. To those leaders and companies who are saying, oh, we don't believe in remote working and we want our employees back full time, I would say that it's not looking good for them. Maybe in the short term, employees will be forced to come back and work for such companies. At the end of the day, given that the hybrid model is going to become the norm, they will not be able to attract employees. They will not be able to retain employees. I already saw some comments earlier this week where number of companies in Pakistan, there are, I don't want to take names, but the leaders are saying that we would like employees to be back. They don't believe in remote working of any sorts. And like I said, it's a matter of time. Uh, in a world where everything is out on social networks, uh, employees are able to comment on channels like Glassdoor. This is going to come out. So they won't be able to attract, they won't be able to maintain EVP. I think the hybrid model is here to stay, and it's not going to change. When we think about the future of work, and for multinational companies, I know for a fact that they're thinking about location strategy. For domestic players, you could still actually think about location strategy. So if I take as an example, if you have a company that has only an office in Karachi, as an example, you might be like, why can't I have employees work from a tier 2 city or a tier 3 city? Or for a multinational company, why do they have to operate in only 5 locations? Why can't they operate in multiple locations? And when you think about location strategy, what comes into play is the growth of the business, the productivity of employees, and the efficiency of employees. And if you take all three of them, the chart on the right with the colored portions, they will come into play even more. I'll give you 2 examples. If you're going to allow employees to work from anywhere, right? How are you going to manage talent development, especially talent acquisition? If you need a particular skill set, right, for a particular job, and that skill set is not available in certain cities, then that's going to have a challenge in terms of your talent management strategy. And for many large markets like China, India, US, where tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3 cities actually have a sizable differential in terms of pay. If you move somebody from tier 1 to tier 2 city in terms of your location strategy, you will need to reduce pay. And that's a lot of discussions a lot of companies are having, that if we allow people to work from anywhere, do we reduce their pay? Do we reduce their benefits? Who's going to manage mobility costs, etc.? So location strategy is important. It is a valid discussion as far as the future is concerned, but there are a lot of implications companies have to think about. And some of these on the right are some of the things that we should be thinking about. If you are involved in any of these discussions, please take these items back to your companies and start discussing them. As of right now, 80% companies are actually updating their remote working program. That's a huge number. That means 4 out of 5 companies are actually, as we speak right now, working on this on the remote working program, or whatever that means for you. I have been part of recent forums where the number one discussion companies are having is around future of work, remote working. Are they going to allow? Are they not going to allow? 60% of companies are actually asking employees about the remote working preferences. I know for a fact many companies have actually combined the engagement surveys and they've added 2, 3, 4, 5 questions around what's their preference. Do they want to work remotely? Do they want to come back to the office? Would they prefer if they get vaccinated and come back, etc.? So 60% companies are doing that, and half of the companies roughly are actually monitoring the productivity of remote workers. You see, at the end of the day, whether you're on-site or off-site, it should not matter. It's about ultimately providing the flexibility, making sure that the employees are productive, making sure the employees have the tools to do their jobs well, and they're completely engaged. And so there are companies, 50% of companies are monitoring whether remote working is useful at the end of the day or it's not. And when we think, and this is a chart I just downloaded about 2 days back. I was in a forum for all the tech companies in APAC. And this is from, again, a study that did on future of work. I would say that for tech companies in Asia, performance management and talent retention is absolutely on top. If you remember my first slide on the fundamental shift, part of the hybrid working implication is around performance management. If you look at any study in the past 20 to 30 years on performance management, hands down, I can tell you, in any research, you will see 2 out of 3 companies at any given point in time are actually thinking of revamping or completely changing their performance management system, which means that generally companies are always struggling with the performance management programs. And it's even more highlighted in an environment where employees are working from home. Think about last year in 2020, at the end of the year, is the first time in the history where maximum number of managers evaluated and assessed maximum number of employees without having spent time most of the time during the year, right? If you ask employees, I guarantee you 50% plus employees will say they're not happy with the performance management evaluation. Whether it's the goal setting a problem, whether it's the evaluation, whether they were not happy with the reward, the challenge is that we got to figure out a way to improve performance management deliverables, right? We cannot deliver any kind of future of work without focusing on what does it mean to have a good performance management system. And if you do poorly on performance management system, it is going to reflect in terms of reward because you're not differentiating performance, right? You're not differentiating what a top performer gets versus a lower performer. And obviously that is going to add into in terms of talent retention, in terms of motivation, in terms of engagement. So performance management has to be upfront, and we have to talk about and figure out a way to make this effective for companies. The other big area that I would say has come up just drastically, I would say in the last 4 to 5 years, is this whole concept of diversity and inclusion, and now we're calling it DE&I. And I would say absolutely the high-tech sector has taken a little bit more stride in this field. But a lot of discussions when we think about future of work are around what is the impact on company culture. Whatever the endpoint is, what does it mean in terms of workforce talent availability, and ultimately diversity, equity, and inclusion. And some of the work that I've seen in my company and some of my friends working for other companies, DE&I is very much upfront right now. With all the news around Me Too movement, around racism issues across the world, a number of other issues that have come up, DE&I has become pretty much upfront in terms of the challenge that companies are facing and what we need to do in terms of future. I would say if you're not thinking about it, it is the right time to start right now. In fact, we're already too late. A lot of companies are doing a lot of work. And if you think about the progress made over the past few years, specifically in the high-tech sector, and this is not limited, I'm sure other companies are doing as well, 82% of the high-tech companies are actually expanding the talent pool for candidate diversity. So it's no longer just gender-based. We're thinking ethnicity, we're thinking race, we're thinking color, we're thinking religion, we're thinking language, right? And they have about 73% of companies actually are communicating clearly what the DE&I objectives and commitments are. Not just internally, but externally as well. My company, about 5 years back, decided that we're going to publish a D&I report publicly where we're going to talk about the distribution of a headcount in terms of ethnicity and also gender pay equity. And a lot of companies are getting onto the bandwagon where they really want to focus on gender pay equity. Gender pay equity issue is a global issue. It's not only in emerging markets, even in developed markets, it's an issue. 65% companies are actually expanding unconscious bias training. Believe it or not, all of us have some sort of conscious or unconscious bias. And unfortunately, a lot of this conscious and unconscious bias starts with gender biasness, whether it's assessment, whether it's pay, whether it's promotions. And 64% of these companies are actually implementing measures around employee selection and hiring process. I'll give you one example. We've seen that in general, when we hire female talent, unfortunately, the general practice is to pay them lower than how we would pay our male employees and male colleagues. The challenge is that once you hire them at a lower pay, it gets compounded over a period of time. And if you consider the fact that 20 to 30% of your headcount is female talent, and if you're on average making this error, I would say, when you bring them in, you cannot correct this over a period of time. And because we already know we've got these unconscious and conscious biases around promotions and evaluations, it just gets compounded over a period of time. In my company, I've been part of this work for about 4 years now, and I can tell you it's not an easy solve. But at least at a hiring stage, if you can do the correct action, then at least you save yourself from some of the troubles. If you think about the entire HR value chain, and I'm not going to go through all of this, when you think about the future of work, this is the level of details you need to think about. whether it's talent acquisition, whether it's culture and communication, whether it's employee experience, whether it's reward. I'll give you one example. In talent acquisition on the left, who would have thought that there are employees who have now started new jobs, 9 months, 10 months, 1 year, and they've not met their managers. They've not even seen the office, right? So their entire onboarding has been virtual. And what does it mean in terms of the future? Where we're going to allow employees to basically work from anywhere. What does that mean in terms of engagement? How are we going to onboard them? How are we going to make them productive? How are we going to make them feel part of a team, right? So when you think about the future of work and you think about the model that we are going to adopt, you have to think about these things. And that's the level of detail we have to think about in HR, because it's our responsibility. So from a reward perspective, how am I going to pay them? How am I going to give them benefits? And so that's the level of detail we got to think about, and the discussion we need to have at the company level. I'm going to stop there and move on to the next topic, which is wellness. The concept of wellness has been evolving over a period of time. I would say that for majority of the time, the understanding that wellness is actually around physical. I would say over the past 7 to 8 years, the whole concept of wellness has evolved into what we call holistic well-being, which is actually that it's a multi-dimensional thing and not just physical wellness. And the standard definition of holistic wellness is around these 4 areas: physical wellness, emotional wellness, financial, and social community, right? And I'll talk about emotional financial a little bit. But when we think about social and community wellness, it's about how are we connected with our customers? How are we connected with the community we live in? How are we connected with our families, right? Do we have programs and structure in place where we allow ourselves to be integrated more with the family and more with the community? And how can we give back? And so when you think about the whole concept of holistic wellness, it's not as simple as physical. If you have financial stress, you are going to have an impact on emotional stress. If you are emotionally unwell, it is going to have an impact on your physical wellness. And so I think when you think about this concept, please keep all these 4 strategic thrusts in mind. Aon released this global well-being study, and you can see I've highlighted the key points in red. 42% of companies have said that employee engagement has always been a challenge, but the challenge becomes bigger when they start to include well-being initiatives. That means companies say, okay, if I want to think about emotional wellness or financial wellness, all of a sudden my employee engagement challenge becomes bigger, right? And there are implications to it. 82% of companies saying that they actually consider employee well-being a priority, but they don't have a strategy in place, right? And actually that's worrying, because you cannot just invest and say, oh, I'm going to implement a well-being program without really thinking about what does it mean in terms of strategy. How does it fit into your overall wellness piece or into your total reward offering? And so companies are doing something, but they're not being very thoughtful about how they're implementing. That is the lack of well-being strategy. Most concerning is, since the beginning of the pandemic, 42% employees have actually said that they've increased their decline in mental health. I can guarantee you that the actual numbers are about 80 to 90%. I've done a lot of interventions over the past 12 months in my company across the region and globally as well. We've seen that the decline in mental health is a very much a big issue right now. We've had employees come to us and say that I would like to know more about trauma. Employees have come up to us and said, hey, I would like to know more about how to manage my stress. Even more, we've seen a difference between how managers and leaders manage stress and how employees are doing it. Managers who are leading teams have a different kind of stress. And in markets where the pandemic has been really tough, we're seeing a different kind of stress. If you have EAP program and EAP vendors in your company, please ask them, if you already haven't, what the EAP utilization is. We've seen EAP utilization go up to 4,200% in some cases in some markets. That's just ridiculous, right? That means from people who never went and who didn't even bother with EAP, all of a sudden, a large number of people are actually reaching out to EAP service providers and asking for help, asking for counseling. And then red flags. Red flags from an EAP perspective are people who are getting very close to committing suicide, or who have actually considered committing suicide. And the EAP vendors actually, through the discussions, can actually tell you how many cases of red flags you've had. And you'd be surprised how high the number is. And not to mention domestic violence. Last year around May or June, a report came out that since China implemented a very strict um, lockdown, the number of domestic violence cases went up. I read a report late last year where a number of Southeast Asian markets, the domestic violence cases went up. It's a phenomenon that's happening everywhere. Doesn't get reported. Does not mean it doesn't happen. What are we doing as companies to support our employees who unfortunately might be going through that? And going forward, as you think about the future and the well-being for your employees, what are you doing to support them? 50% of employees actually would like their employers to provide some sort of health and financial well-being. 78% companies would like long-term financial planning, but only 23% of companies are providing that. Similarly, 65% employees want financial education. Only 20% companies are providing that. In Asia, most of our retirement plans are not adequate. Yeah, if you think about you're going to retire at 65, 70 years, what are you doing right now for retirement planning? I can guarantee you in Asia, it's not a common phenomenon. And unfortunately, we don't even understand what financial wellness is about. So what are we going to do about it? Right? And why is it so important? Because people don't understand, firstly, the implications of not planning ahead, right? If you have financial stress, and unfortunately, the pandemic has caused millions of people to lose jobs. So many of, if you're not directly impacted, people have gotten impacted. And if you're under financial stress, you're going to have poor eating habits. You're going to have low social connections. You're going to be absent for more days. You're going to be disengaged. This research is from Towers Watson, who are one of the leading providers of financial wellness solutions across the world. And something I'm working on a project with them, so I got these numbers from them. And these are hiring numbers. We don't talk about financial wellness, but it is very much an issue. I've gotten so many messages on WhatsApp about people losing jobs, and unfortunately, they don't have enough to live by. And it goes with this research where 2 out of 5 employees in APAC are living paycheck to paycheck. So if you lose your job, you're not going to be able to survive next month. That's just absolutely ridiculous. And because we also don't understand, the concept of financial wellness, we're not planning both in the short term and the long term. And so it has a direct impact on the quality of life in terms of how we manage our savings. How are we planning for retirement? And nobody's talking about this. And so one of the things I would say in the past, so we focused on emotional wellness during the pandemic, and it's very much an area of focus going forward. But in the last 5 to 7 months, employees are actually coming out and saying, hey, can you please help us with financial wellness? I'm running a program in my company right now on financial education, and we're getting a really, really nice positive feedback. Employees are like, oh, I didn't know how to manage debt. Oh, I didn't know how to budget better. Oh, I didn't know how to think about short-term savings and long-term planning. And so I think as we think about engagement and well-being of our employees, emotional wellness absolutely has to stay. We have to provide support, but we have to start thinking about financial wellness of employees as well. And you don't have to offer everything, right? You can see all the wellness initiatives here. You don't have to offer car insurance. You don't have to offer gym membership. You can start with basics first. You should provide employee assistance program, which is something that you can see most companies are doing. But you can think about, education on financial wellness. You can provide interventions around emotional wellness, right? Everybody needs some sort of help. You can provide medical checkups, right? Start with small interventions, measure the utilization, and then increase as your affordability improves. But the point is that you have to think about wellness holistically and put interventions in place. Last point on wellness is that there is a lot of technology out there. In the last 12 to 15 months, I've been approached by at least about 15 to 20 companies who have some sort of a digital platform in terms of measuring wellness. They're not very expensive. I'm sure we've got local domestic providers who are looking to this as well. This just allows you to give another tool to your employees to measure their wellness. So this is an example of a tool that you can basically play with the app, put in your lifestyle choices, put in what you do, what you don't, whether you work out or you don't, quality of life, and it gives you a health score and identifies areas where there might be risks, right? And actually, the best thing about companies is that even though the employees' the personal data is not disclosed, you can actually run analytics on this. You can find out how many percentage of employees are at very high risk, whether they have one critical illness, two critical illness, and what kind of sort of issues these kind of technology can give to employees. And indirectly, it will help you manage your uh, medical costs. Because if you know that a large percentage of your population is not well, please don't be surprised at a very high loss ratio for your benefits. Obviously, it's going to go up because people are not doing well. So there is an implicit benefit in trying to adopt these technologies. And like I said, if the utilization is poor, please discontinue. There's no reason why you should be paying for something the employees don't appreciate. So I'll stop there on wellness, and I'll quickly move into the last deep dive, which is AI analytics and data models. And I didn't know, I thought about separating AI data models and analytics, but I think it was a bit difficult. So I've just combined them. What are the studies around how do we use AI in HR and where are you investing? You can see there are so many areas, but I've highlighted some of the more easy ones. I think the main area where I think AI has made probably the biggest stride is around assessment, right? Algorithms, assessment, the recruitment process. We've got lots of good tools out there that looks at improving and using AI to assess candidates better. No longer needed to go through 2,000 resumes. We've got a fantastic tool underpinned by AI that does the work for us. You can look at the middle column, middle portion here, which says AI to nudge managers to take action or have conversation with employees. And you don't necessarily need AI. You can have a really nice tool, HRMS tool, with these filters that can, hey, tell employees and managers, hey, by the way, you need to have a mid-year conversation. Hey, by the way, it's your employee's 4th anniversary in the company. Please send them a congratulations. It's your employee's birthday. Please send them a note. You can actually have all these things built in and obviously improve the conversation that our employees are having with the managers and vice versa, right? I haven't at least seen any tool right now that has really good AI built in terms of the compensation process. But yes, there are really sophisticated data models, and I'll give you an example in a bit. At least in my view, these are the 4 areas where I've seen the use of AI and really good data models. Recruitment, I'll talk about that. Services, in terms of chatbots, self-servicing, compensation, and then advanced analytics and metrics. First example, I've taken this actually slide from one of my friends. He runs a gamified platform, which I think is really cool. It's called the Talent Games. But what I really like is the points that you see here, right? Where is the AI coming in? So number one, if there is a bias around names, whether it's whatever gender it is, that biasness is gone. So it's inclusive, right? Obviously, from a millennials perspective, and people who are just graduating, they like this technology, so it's more inclusive, right? Nobody likes to fill out resumes and apply for 10 forms online. These assessment and tools allow them to have a much nicer candidate experience. Recruiters are happy because the time to hire and the amount of time they spend going through resumes has been reduced. And above all, you have unbiased AI insights. Technology at the back is giving you value in terms of all the data that's being collected. And that wasn't the case a few years back. But now, thanks to AI and the advancement in technology, we're able to do that. Very, very few companies are doing that. But we have what we call data-driven model that few companies have adopted. And what this is doing is that rather than managers saying, I want to give employee A 2%, employee B 5%, you have a model that looks at a variety of factors that you and I cannot. This is an advanced math data model where you look at a number of different factors, budgets, ratings, people, male and females doing the same job on the same grade, looking at the gender pay differential. There are managers that are lenient, there are managers who are very strict, right? It ignores all that fact. So it's keeping everything at the same level and then giving out a salary, bonus, and equity output, right? So all the biasness and all the issues that you might have, concerns around in evaluation, the model ignores that. My company is doing that. I know a number of other companies who have started implementing these models. And in my view, over the next 2 to 3 years, this is going to become a norm. And what it's doing in terms of principle is, number one, many companies are actually moving from performance-based salary increase to job-based salary increase. That means, and that's also because partly the gender pay issue is very much upfront. So it's making sure that if employee is getting a very high salary, right, they should get a slightly minimal salary because another gender is not being paid adequately and budgets are limited. If you're promoting somebody, just because you're promoting somebody doesn't mean that you have to put them at the lower end of the next grade. They might be high value employee. They might already have the skill set. So the positioning has to be correct as far as the new grade is concerned. Companies that give equity, you want to make sure you're differentiating equity, both in terms of performance, but also in terms of future oriented potential. And lastly, bonus plans have to ensure differentiation. There is no point of you having a bonus plan if everybody gets the same bonus. And that's to my earlier point around performance management. One of the challenges around performance management is reward differentiation. So compensation model actually looks at all these principles and then gives out numbers accordingly. Quickly, I talked about AI in chatbots and self-service. Uh, I've seen a number of technologies where chatbots are doing amazing job. I would have gone to my HRMS, applied for my leave, figured out how many leaves I have left, taken 5 to 7 minutes. You can see the example here. Probably didn't take more than 30 seconds to apply for leave. The chat box is run by an engine in the back, and this will automatically add the leaves you've taken into your HRMS. So a lot of your processes are now being done through chatbots. You can ask for a policy on bereavement. You can ask for what's the leave policy in, for my company. What's my in companies that implement total reward statements. You can say, can you please share my total reward statement? And the chatbot would give you a link. And where AI is not taking place, you can still have a very high level of automation around self-service. Um, a lot of companies have invested and they have dedicated teams who build these tools at the back where employees don't need to go to HR operations anymore. So you have a question, go to the portal, create a ticket, find out where the answer is, and it's employee self-service and it's manager self-service. So HR operations is now getting a lot of time off attending to employees' query. So this is a lot of advancement against based on AI and automation. And lastly, analytics. And I'm conscious of time that I'm going to try and finish in the next 2 to 3 minutes. Analytics is important because at the end of the day, we want to make better decisions, which will lead to better talent outcomes. When we make better talent decisions based on analytics, we see 5.5 times higher retention, 7.3 times higher performing teams, and highly engaged teams as well. Why is that? Because we are not making decisions based on feelings. We're using historical data to make very accurate decisions around talent outcomes because we are using data to figure out, okay, when we did that, that was the outcome. So our decision making ability becomes better. And it's very, very important that we invest in this area and we understand how this works. And this whole culture is around three subsets: knowledge of making analytics, what is analytics and what analytics should think about, what kind of behaviors and mindset we should have, when do we need analytics, in what areas should we apply, and how should we apply it. Just a very random example of what kind of data you should be looking at. This is a survey done by this was a survey that covered about 3,800 companies. You can see percentage of companies that collect this data, that report on this data, but companies who don't even know about this. Even things like employee engagement scores, there are 25% companies who don't even measure employee engagement scores. That's the base level analytics, if anything, right? And so this is just one example. You have a lot of data, but how are you converting the data into insights and analytics? Ultimately, we want to get to predictive and prescriptive analytics. A lot of companies are still at descriptive stages, some at diagnostic analytics. But when we think about insights and foresight, we have to move the needle and we have to move towards predictive analytics and prescriptive analytics. And then lastly, the whole concept of AI and automation and data models is not easy. I understand that. Firstly, let me just qualify, not everything has to be AI. We're on this bandwagon where AI has become the buzzword. I'm sorry, but not everything has to be AI. You can do an amazing job with, just with Excel actually, but having advanced data models, right? Again, limitations also is linked because AI requires talent. Not everybody has the skill set. It's a specialized field. So you need to invest. And obviously, there's scarcity of talent. Data privacy is a big issue for multinational companies. You can ask them. Securing data is absolutely important. Otherwise, there are penalties actually. AI actually requires deep learning and review. So you just can't make a model and just assume that it's going to run. You have to keep looking at it. You have to keep tweaking it. integration to other models. You might have an AI tool, but if it doesn't speak to other tools, then you're not really fully utilizing the value of that tool. And AI doesn't build overnight. You can't just make a data model and say, oh, AI is driving it. AI keeps learning, as you know. It requires time. It requires a lot of data. It requires a lot of tweaking. It requires a lot of testing. So you have to go over a period of time where the model starts to run better and better. Point being that AI is going to take over. It is taking over. It's actually impacting a lot of processes as far as HR is concerned. A lot of tools are underpinned by data, but please also don't be bogged down by this buzzword. If you don't have AI, it doesn't matter. You can create advanced data tools. You can look at what's available, and you can still add value through other areas as well. As long as the focus is in terms of automation, digitization, we talked about earlier elevating HR's capability. I think we should be good. With that, I am going to stop sharing. And I think we might have some time for some questions. So over to you, Hassan.
Thank you very much for this amazing session. By the look of on the list of questions, I think people really enjoyed that, and there are a lot of people asking so many questions. So I'm just gonna bring them one by one to you, and I know that there's a time limit, so we will quickly try to cover all those points. But if we cannot, if we cannot cover all the questions in detail, we can always be reached out later on. All right. So first question is by Muhammad Bilal from International Steels Limited. He's asking that how do we differentiate between AI and automation? If you can clarify by example, please.
All right. I'm not an expert on AI, but I'll try and give you the simplest example of automation. 15 years back, when you got paid, right, a HR used to issue you a salary slip, which was a physical slip, right? Hey, you've been paid whatever X thousand rupees, and that's your pay slip. When you talk about automation, that means you don't issue a physical pay slip. You actually go on a portal, and it has a digitized version of your pay slip, and you can download that. That's a simple example of automation. AI is a lot more complex because AI is built on very complex math models and data models, and it requires very specific training and skill set. Right? I'll give you an example where if you want to build a deep learning, we talked about the assessment example right now for talent, right? You can't just say, oh, I play the game and I get the answer straight away. The answer is no right and wrong in AI. It's a continuous learning. So it requires a lot more technology. It requires deep understanding. It requires, I would say, specific degree in AI. Automation can be, like I said, a simple example is Spaceship, or you have a PowerPoint that you deliver and you're going to put that online so that you don't have to print out and give your employees. You've automated the process of delivering trainings and you have just put it online. And that's an example of automation to me, very simply.
Okay, so the next in line is a question by Wasim Malik from Midas Safety. He's asking, how do you see the pandemic impacting the landscape of organizations' design and work systems?
Look, I would say that pandemic has already impacted the way we look at organizational design. If you think about, I talked about the redesigning of jobs, right? That's actually part of organizational design. Because if you are going to figure out how is my organization going to work 18 months from now, where 30% of my headcount is not going to be coming to the office, right? That's about figuring out the jobs that you have and the organizational design. Right? And organizational design work typically is always future oriented. And so you can't do this in isolation. You also have to link your business strategy and business plans for the next 2 to 3 years. A lot of OD consultants that you will talk to will actually start with what is your business objectives actually. So I would say that the pandemic has obviously shifted. It's specific for finance. But the pandemic has forced us to think about the future in terms of, like I said, the hybrid work model, but redesigning of jobs. And with that in mind, how does it impact the organizational design? That's something that we need to discuss. I assume by work system you mean automation. I've already talked about the fact that the change in technology has been accelerated, and so work system, I assume you mean automation. So I would say that pandemic has forced us, right? I cannot go to my office printer and print out. I have to do a lot of things online now. And so we've been forced to adopt technology faster.
Okay, so thank you, Now the next question is, with technology and digitization progressing the way it is, what is the future of HR department? It is asked by Jamil Janjua.
I don't know if I understand the question correctly, but the future of HR is what it is. We will evolve just like everybody else. It doesn't mean HR will go away, if that's what you're trying to ask. For us to be value, for us to add value, for us to keep adding value, we have to evolve as well. So some of the themes and principles that I talked about, because they're very relevant, at least from as far as I'm aware, as far as I'm concerned, we have to evolve, we have to keep learning. Analytics absolutely is going to be, I think, in the right, left, and center of what we do, how we drive decision making. So when we talk about technology and digitization, we in HR have to make sure that we're investing the right amount, we're investing the right talent in the future of HR, whatever work that we do and whatever businesses that you support.
All right. So the next question is, okay, so it's from Isa. He's actually asking, the biggest issue of employees felt during remote work was that managers didn't trust remote work. How does HR play a role in promoting hybrid culture with high trust?
Look, I don't think there's a easy answer to this. I think there is a cultural element to this, right? If the managers are not supporting the employees, then I'm sorry, I'm being brutal here, but maybe there's an issue with the manager here, right? And that also talks about the company culture. You have to create a culture of trust in the company, right? It should be an implicit understanding that you have hired people who are capable, who know what jobs they're doing, and managers need to trust employees and employees need to trust managers. So if you have employees and managers who are not trusting employees, then you got to have a very serious talk with them and have a very serious discussion and say, why are you not trusting employees? Do they have valid reasons they're not trusting him because they think their productivity is low, or there's an issue? And if they just think that no, they're not being productive and I don't trust them, I'm sorry, that doesn't mean anything. So you need to have a very serious conversation with those managers.
Okay. So this question is from Kasim Bal. He's from Food Panda. Technology companies are growing in Pakistan and it's more salary heavy rather benefits, but we still have lots of pressure with regards to benefits. How to manage their expectations?
Look, there are a number of issues around how we manage benefits. Firstly, you have to figure out how much you're spending on benefits. That's number one. Secondly, whatever you're spending, what is your utilization rate? You might be giving amazing benefits, but if the utilization is 2%, you're wasting money, right? Thirdly, the biggest issue I see around benefits management is communication, right? We have nice or decent benefits, but we don't communicate to our employees. I've had so many experiences and examples where companies just don't communicate what the benefits are. And sometimes when employees need benefits, they don't even understand how to go about it. So benefits is something that you should be providing. I would say the issue is not so much around why are we providing it. Let me give you an example. God forbid an employee gets into a medical emergency, right? If you're not providing any sort of medical coverage, then the employee is going to be devastated because they're going to be financially impacted, they're going to be emotionally impacted. A certain level of benefit allows employees safeguarding, and that's the well-being part. In terms of what the expectation is, you can figure out how much you can spend, how you can spend, and I can absolutely tell you that there are always very creative ways of figuring out the benefits that you can offer your employees. You have to be a bit creative, but like I said, measure how much you're spending, measure the utilization, and then communicate.
Okay, so Sajjad, just to bring into your knowledge, one of the questions was asked by Jamil Janjua. Jamil Janjua, it's actually I couldn't recognize, but he is actually the pioneers of training industry of Pakistan. So he is one of the very early founders of training industry. He is one of the people. In fact, he is the person who actually shaped the training industry in Pakistan. So we are very honored to have him here. So I'm going to take a couple of more questions since we are reaching to the time end. So I'm just gonna take a few questions, a couple of them, and then we'll move forward to the final ending. And then all the people who have any question, they can reach DataBiz and SIMFOTIX so their answers can be answered. Now, I'm just gonna ask you this question from Fahad Arif from TPS Worldwide. In terms of percentage, how would you suggest to have AI and Excel-driven data analytics?
I don't know, to be honest, if I understand the question well, because AI is very different from Excel-driven data analytics. I'm going to try and attempt an answer, and I apologize, Fahad, if I am not able to answer your question. I would park AI for the time being, right? And I'll give you one example, and I hope that I'm trying to answer your question. If you have an Excel file with all the employee information, right? Whether it's their date of birth, whether it's the gender, whether it's the pay, how much bonus they got, what the salary is, as a starting point, if you don't have analytics, that's already a great starting point for you to have. You can do a lot of analytics using pivot tables, using Excel files. So my short answer is that whatever data you have on employees, whether it's personal data or it's salary data or it's reward data, you can actually play around with the data. In Excel itself, using pivot tables, you can do a variety of work there, and you can come up with 10, 15 charts, and that's your starting point in terms of data analytics. AI, I would just park for right now.
Okay. So just to the very last question, it's from Ashar from Lucky Motors. What's the future of human interaction in the future of work? What can possibly substitute for? What can be the possible substitute for that?
Again, I'm sorry if I'm not very clear on the question. If
All right.
you're asking around the
I
need
personally,
for,
I personally think that I mean, in terms of question, it needs to be little specified. But let me just move to another question. This is going to be our last question. Then we'll conclude.
yeah,
All right.
okay.
Okay. So this question is from Sayyid Zishan Hussain from MVV Funds. Mental health impact on employees during pandemic. If you can just briefly discuss that.
Look, I already discussed this in one of my slides. I talked about the importance of emotional wellness, which is mental health. I cannot state more how important it has been and it is going to be. Please, if you think that the need for mental wellness and emotional wellness has finished, it's not. All of us are struggling in our own ways around emotional wellness and mental health. So, and we're still going through the pandemic. So the pandemic has not finished. And unfortunately, over the next few months, it doesn't seem like it's going to end. So my answer to you is absolutely, it is a point of focus. Figure out ways to see how you can support your employees and yourself as well around emotional wellness. If you don't have an EAP provider, please go to an EAP provider. I know for a fact there are a lot of counselors in Pakistan, and I'm sure in the Middle East as well, where you can reach out and you can provide those services to your employees. So they at least have an avenue to talk to.
Okay. So with this, Sajjad, we come to an end to this great session. In the end, again, I would like to thank you and thank all the HR fraternity and the people who have joined us and they took some time out of their busy schedule. So again, people, this is just a beginning. We have all these topics covered in just a brief. We can have a detailed workshop on that. We can provide a detailed workshop on all these topics. So if you have any questions that needs to be asked, you can always reach TerraBiz at SIMFOTIX, and we will forward those questions to Sajjad and see if he can answer that. Okay, so with this, Hassan Siddiqui is just about to sign off from SIMFOTIX and TerraBiz. Again, once again, it's just a thank you to all of you. Have a great day at work. Goodbye.
Thanks, everyone. Goodbye. Have a good day.